the third block of my story is about this stick.
Oh, cool.
The origins of this stick.
Cool.
It's about how this
You
stick.
got the stick to prove it.
Well, yeah, well, that's it. This stick was a dragon
Yeah.
turned into a stick by a magic stone.
I love it.
Well, lately I've been getting a lot of questions about the origins of storytelling. So I figured this would be a good time to tell you how stories got started. So we go back to Northern Europe about 20 or 25,000 years ago during the last ice age. There was a clan of cave people living in a cave, and their main activity was mammoth hunting. It was, they got their food, their tools, their clothes, and it was entertainment as well. Now, the mammoths, they had a sport they liked to practice too, which was called face dancing. And they would do this little dance on the face of hunters that were not quite fast enough at getting out of the way. Now, when you got face danced by a mammoth, that usually ended your career as a hunter, and as anything else, really. So, we're in this cave, and they're kind of running out of mammoth hunters. So they decide, well, we got to train the new cohorts. So the two best hunters of the clan were Gronk and Bronk. Gronk was a little bit better at mammoth hunting than Gronk. So they asked Gronk to train the next cohort. Problem with Gronk, he was a great hunter, but he was a terrible speaker. And he was boring. And he's going on, well, when you walk up to a mammoth. The kids got so bored, the young people, they started doing all kinds of graffiti on the walls of the cave. Matter of fact, if you go to northern France, you can still see that graffiti on the walls of the caves there. So the next morning, they go out mammoth hunting with Gronk. And one of the things Gronk had told them is, don't go near the female mammoths. They're really, really mean. But the young hunters hadn't listened. They came upon this big female mammoth and they all got face danced. So we're back to square one. No mammoth hunters. So Bronk took over. Now Bronk, he wasn't quite as good a hunter as Gronk was, but he was a fantastic speaker. So instead of teaching them, he told them the story of his mammoth hunt. And he put a lot of color, a lot of movement in, and I was walking up, and you have to watch, never go after the females, just the males. And, you go up and throw your stick and step out of the way. And the kids are just sitting there glued to their stumps and rocks watching this, listening to them. And the next morning, they went out mammoth hunting, and they got two young male mammoths. I think only two of the hunters got face danced, which was really, really good for that time. It was a really good performance. So that's when they discovered that, hey, doing stories was a great way to teach people how to do things. And they started using this, and that's how storytelling got started. Now, at the time, with this new technique of teaching, the population just exploded in the clan. There was all kinds of people surviving, and they were getting, you get a male mammoth. You've got enough food and clothes and bones to make tools for at least a year. So the population was exploding. So what they started doing when the old people were too old to hunt, well, they were a lot of trouble to look after that. So what they would do is they invented another sport, saber-toothed tiger wrestling. And they would take the old people and just put a little sash around their waist and send them out to wrestle the saber-toothed tiger. And, well, none of them ever survived. So it wasn't a very popular sport with the old people. So the elders got together and they said, now what could we do to convey to these young people that even though we're old, we have something to contribute? So one of them said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll tell them a story. And this is the story he told them. He said, one day there was an old cave wolf. He'd been chasing a rabbit for a long ways, and he didn't catch him. And he was so tired, and he was sore all over. And the first thing he saw beside him was a young cave bear coming at him. Now he knew that he had no chance fighting this cave bear, and he was too tired and sore to run away. So what am I going to do? Now he saw right beside him a pile of bones, the jackalope bones. So he moved over to the bones and he took one of them and he started chewing on it. And when the bear got to within hearing distance, he said, "Oh boy, that bear was good. I could eat another one." Well, the bear heard this and said, "Oh boy, I haven't got a chance against a wolf that just ate a whole bear and he's still hungry." So he runs off into the bush hoping that the wolf hadn't seen him. Now, there was a little squirrel in a tree just over this, and he'd seen everything. So he said, "Oh, that old wolf has played a trick on the bear." But that wolf used to chase the squirrel all the time, so the squirrel went to see the bear, and he said, "You know that wolf there? Yeah, it was a close call." He said, "Well, he didn't eat another bear. He just did that to play a trick on you so you'd leave him alone. That was actually a pile of jackalope bones." "Oh, yeah? Well, jump on my back and I'm going to go find that wolf, and I'm going to have me a wolf for lunch." So the squirrel jumps on the bear's back and they start walking back towards the wolf. The wolf sees them. He's still too tired to run away, and he can tell by the look on the bear's face that he's in really deep trouble. So what am I going to do? What am I going to do? So he waits until the bear with the squirrel on his shoulders is close enough that he can hear him, and he said, "Oh boy," he says, "I wonder where that squirrel went. I sent him out to get me another bear 2 hours ago, and he's not back yet." Well, the bear thought, that squirrel's trying to trick me. So he turned around, he ate the squirrel, and he ran off into the bush. So this was the story that the old people would tell the young people to show them that old people might, be stiff and sore and not too good at hunting and running, but they're wise and they can teach people things. So that's when that clan stopped the saber-toothed tiger wrestling. And since then, we've been using stories to either, relay our values and our legends and to teach people things. But nowadays, things are a little bit different. We tend to use them more as entertainment. Well, it was entertainment back then because the only thing they had to do then was to sit there and watch the sparks in the fire, So you only had the one channel. Sometimes, depending, you put a different kind of wood in, you'd get a slightly different pattern, but after a few moons of doing this, it got pretty boring. So storytelling was also a great form of entertainment. But anyways, we'll move to a more modern story. See, when I was a young man, years and years ago, my job was to go from village to village and bring them news of the other village. I'd take off from Orleans and I'd walk to Cumberland. And, well, did you know Mrs. Smith's cow had twin calves? Or did you know Mr. Lebrun's barn burned down yesterday? And people would give me a meal and a place to sleep, and I'd also tell them stories. That was my job. I really enjoyed it. But one day, I'm walking through the Enchanted Forest. Now, the Enchanted Forest, if you've never been there, is the most wonderful, beautiful place in the world. The Enchanted Forest, the sky is always blue, but there are rainbows all over the place. The streams are like cool apple juice. Now, the fish in the streams are like gummy fish, like gummy bears, but they're fish. There are flowers that are actually marshmallows. Birds, every color imaginable of birds is in the Enchanted Forest, and they'll land on your shoulder and they'll sing you songs, and they never poop on your shoulders or on your head. That's a big plus, It's a beautiful, beautiful place. There are trees. The trees are as tall as buildings. And in those trees, every fruit imaginable grows. There's apples and pears and pineapples and blueberries and strawberries and raspberries and oranges and kiwis and you name it. And if you want one, because the trees are so tall, you just lift your hand up and you say, boy, I would love to eat a pineapple. And a branch with a pineapple will come down and drop it into your hand. So I'm sitting there on a rock looking at this saying, I'm so lucky to be here. This is such a gorgeous place. When all of a sudden, I hear in the distance a voice, help, help, help me, help. So I start running and running and running. And there's this old woman. And these three hoodlums are trying to steal her bag of provisions. Like a bag of groceries, but they didn't have grocery stores. So I walk up and I grab them by the ear and I twist their ear and I kick them in the bum and I chase them away. Now, I didn't know that the old woman was actually a witch, but she was a good witch. And to thank me, she gave me a little stone on a gold chain. And she said, this stone can save your life one time. This is my thanks for you saving me. I thanked her. I mean, I didn't believe in magic stones. I mean, come on, like a magic stone? Really? But it was beautiful. It was light. It's almost as if you weren't holding anything. And when you turned it, it kind of changed color. And that gold chain was so delicate, so finely made, but you could pull it as hard as you wanted and it wouldn't break. So I put it around my neck and I had it there for years and I completely forgot about it. Now, one day, I'm walking to another village and it's getting to be late in the afternoon. And it's an area that you don't want to be caught in at night. There's lots of thieves and there's wolves, the mean wolves, not the good wolves. So I really, really had to get to the village before dark. Now, the only way I could do it was to go through the Malevolent Forest. Now, the Malevolent Forest is a place you do not want to go. The sky is polluted, dark. There are trees. The trees are all gnarled and dead, and the roots are sticking out of the ground to trip you. That there are spiders as big as cats, and bats bigger than geese. And there are mushrooms there. If you step on a mushroom, it smells like an old fart. Oh, God, they smell terrible. And the water is polluted. So, I'm trying to get through there as fast as I can. When all of a sudden, I hear whoosh, whoosh. And the sun gets blotted out. It gets very dark. And this dragon lands in a little clearing near me. Huge, as long as 3 school buses. And the first thing I did is I hid behind one of those old trees. And the dragon goes, I smell a human and I'm hungry. So, aha! And he blows his fire at the dead tree, turns it into a lump of ash. I hide behind this great big rock, and I'm shivering, and one swoop of his massive tail, he reduces that rock to a little handful of sand. So I'm there in the open. The dragon looks at me and says, I wonder how I'm going to eat you. In a sandwich? Yeah, maybe I'll make a stew. Well, I'll probably just eat you raw. Well, what am I going to do? I can't fight him. I can't run. I'm stuck there. And I feel like a little tugging at my neck. So I look down and the little stone is glowing. So I take it off and I close my eyes and I say, little stone, if you have any magic, boy, this is when I really need it. And I heard a thunderclap and a growling like a rolling thunder and a clunk. And I open my eyes and the dragon is gone. And where the dragon had been, I find this stick. And I look, I pick it up, and it weighs next to nothing. And I start looking at it, and I see there's the eye of the dragon. And here's his other eye. And I remember he had a big scar in his face, I guess where he'd fought with another dragon, and the horns on his nose, and the spines down his back. So that's when I realized that the magic stone had turned this stick into a dragon. So since then, I always have it with me, or I keep it locked up in case another evil witch or wizard gets their hands on it and brings this dragon back to life, because the last thing we want nowadays is another dragon running around. So that's how I got to have this stick. Now, my story is not quite finished. Just one little more detail. You see, after this happened, I went back to the forest where the old woman was living, and I wanted to thank her for giving me the stone that saved my life. And when I got there, she had a daughter about my age. It was love at first sight. We fell in love, we married, and since, well, almost 44 years now, I've been married to a witch. The story I'm going to tell you now is a more modern story. It happened during World War II in northwestern Quebec. Northwestern Quebec was just starting to be settled by people from southern Quebec at that time, and times were hard, very, very hard. People were poor, they didn't know much about farming in the Abitibi region. So times were really tough. And because it was wartime, everything was rationed. So made things even tougher. There's this little boy called Louis, Little Louis Labrec. He was a cute little bugger. He was about 10 years old, cute as a button. And he had an imagination that was unreal. And he always looked to try to find a way to make money for his parents, so they would get out of poverty. Actually, his father used to look forward to being poor because he figured that would be a great step up the social ladder. That's how bad it was. So one day, Louis and his buddy, Hubald, are walking through town, and they get by the house of Mrs. Simpson. Now, Mr. Simpson, he was the manager of the sawmill in town, so they were pretty rich. And they had one of those little doors, you know, for the cats to come in and out of the house, cats and dogs. And Louis sees that and he says, Hube, he says, that's what we're going to do. He says, huh? Kidnap our cat? No. He says, we're going to use my cabin and we're going to put a door like that. And we're going to catch bears and lions and train them for the circus. Now, a lot of you are saying lions in northwestern Quebec. Now, this is a 10-year-old boy. There's no TV. He's never seen a movie. So there's not much that he knows about world geography. So you think it's going to work? Yeah. I'm scared, Louis. Every time we try one of your plans, we either end up getting a good whooping from our parents or we end up with a part of our body in a cast. He says, I'm just getting back to normal after our trial at building a submarine. He says, I don't know. Yeah, what can go wrong? You know, we're going to put this door in and we'll catch a couple of lions and a tiger, a few bears. We'll train them, sell them to the circus, and we'll be rich. Okay, so they go back to Louis' place and they say, well, Dad, can I use some of the tools and a few of the old boards beside the barn? And he said, Hube and I've got an idea for something we want to build at my cabin, you know. Oh, no, you don't go touching my tools. No. Every time there's some catastrophe, and I'm always the one that ends up in all kinds of trouble because of your plans. No. Oh, come on, Dad, please. Okay. You can use the small saw that's on top of the workbench there, but you put it back. And he says, watch it. That saw is sharp. It's shaving sharp. Dad, why would you want to shave with a handsaw? Just put it back, okay? And you can use those old boards there. And there's a couple of hinges, old hinges in the drawer. Put a drop of lard on them to ease them up, and he says they'll do the trick for you, So, okay, they get all this stuff and they go. Now, Louis's cabin, in those days, they had vehicles like, they were kind of like a minivan nowadays, but they were all closed in. And it was one of those old cabins. Those old vehicles, everything had been taken out of it. The tires taken off, the motor, everything. There was just the shell left. And that's what he had turned into a cabin. So even the back door had been taken off. It's called a panel truck is what they called them in French. I don't know what the English word is. So they built this little door on a flap there, and they ran a string through the door and over a hook that they placed, and then down. And Louis went to his mom and asked, Mom, would you have a table scrap or something that I could use for we want to catch bears and lions, And wow, well, she said, well, I got this ham bone here I just boiled for pea soup, and you can have that. So they take the bone and they tie it to the string so it's set up so that when the lion or the bear pulls on it to eat it, it pulls a little stick away from the door slams shut, they can't open it again, and they've got a bear or a lion. So they go to bed and they're all excited and they're happy, and they almost don't sleep the whole night, like just waiting to catch this lion in the morning, to go see their lion in the morning. So in the morning, the sun rises, and Louis's dad, while he was clearing some property at the far end of his 100 section of land, I'm not sure what they're called in English. Anyways, he's walking through there, and it starts to rain. So he decides to take shelter in Louis's old panel truck / cabin. So he opens the side door, goes in, and he's waiting for the rain to stop, and he falls asleep. Well, the storm passes, and Louis and Hubel start walking to go see what they've caught. When they get near the panel truck, they could hear this growling. Oh, we got something, it must be a bear, it must be a lion, we got something. Well, what are we gonna do? Well, the first thing we have to do is go back to Dad's garage and get a chain to tie the doors shut so he can't get out. So they go back and they get a chain, and Louis says to Hubel, grab that shovel right there, like a square manure shovel. It's a big flat blade, weighs about 20 pounds. And he says, that way if he comes to chase us, we can whack him over the head with it. So they go back and they tie the chains around the doors so the side doors couldn't open up, and they could still hear this. Now, at that moment, I guess when they tied the doors and that, it woke up Louis's father, and he wakes up. Wow, I must have dozed on. Then he smells a skunk, and he looks around, and he sees this rather small but very nervous skunk. Oh my God, tries to open the door, and the doors are chained shut. So the boys are saying, look, he's trying to get out. And Louis's dad and the more he's shaking the doors and that, the more nervous the skunk got. So it lets go a good part of its armament. And he sees the little door, and he opens it up, and he tries to squeeze his head out of there. And the kids, oh, look. All they see is a brown fur ball trying to get out of the door. So they take the shovel and they whack it back in, and the father goes back in, and the skunk lets go the rest of it lasted a few seconds, but it was total mayhem. The skunk emptied all of its arsenal on poor Louis's dad. Finally, the boys figured out what was going on, so they opened the doors, let his father out. Now, the father was using some language that I can't repeat here, okay? And he had this great big lump on his head, and so he comes out, and then this rather insulted little skunk comes waddling out and takes off. And Louis says, Dad, what were you doing in my cabin? He said, oh boy, you smell horrible. What happened, Well, Louis's dad, he was so upset, he couldn't even say a word, because he kind of figured the words that would come out were not suitable for young 10-year-old boys. So he went home, and his wife put some an ice pack on him and gave him about 16 baths in the river, of course, because there's no way they could afford to buy cans of tomato juice to wash it off. And it took about a week for the bump on his head to go down. And of course, that week he still smelled pretty bad, so he had to sleep in the barn. And eventually he forgave Louie, and well, everything kind of went back to normal, except that whole summer, every time he got rained on, he'd smell like skunk again. But that's the end of this first adventure of little Louie. Maybe someday I'll tell you another one. Well, I hope you've enjoyed my little stories as much as I've enjoyed telling them to you. Thank you.